Now, let's jump into it. 1 week ago, my wife and I moved into a gated community called Braver Row. From the outside, it seemed perfect, a pristine, picturesque neighborhood with manicured lawns, modern homes, and the promise of peace and quiet. You know, the kind of place that's advertised as exclusive and secure? A suburban paradise for those who could afford it. It looked ideal in photos, but in reality, something about the place felt off the moment we stepped through the gates. After just 2 days, we couldn't stand it anymore. We packed up and moved into a nearby hotel, not planning to go back. And now, all we need to do is sell that house fast. Anywhere but Braver Row will do. Because whatever that place is, we want to be far away from it. It all started with one peculiar, seemingly harmless rule. A rule we would have never imagined could control our lives. "Honey," I called from the lobby, "you've got to see this." Rowan, my wife, came into the room with a beaming smile, still high on the thrill of moving into our dream home. She wrapped her arm around me, tracing her fingers down my spine in that familiar way she does. "What is it?" "Look at this," I said, holding up a leaflet I found on the doormat. My grin faded as I passed it to her. Her eyes skimmed the words alongside mine, and soon her smile slipped away too. "Welcome to your new life in Braver Row. I'm Irene, head of the Homeowners Association, HO, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our vibrant community. You've already met Garden, our resident security guard, so you know safety is our top priority. But what truly makes our community special is the people. We host regular gatherings, garden parties, and movie nights. This is a place where neighbors become friends. However, there's one important rule you must follow without exception. No laughing after dark. This rule is non-negotiable. Please understand, this isn't about noise. We get that life can be loud, TV, music, and normal conversation are all fine. But laughter between sunset and sunrise is strictly prohibited. You may wonder what qualifies as after dark, since the sunset varies throughout the year. Here's my advice. Once the sun starts to dip toward the horizon, stop laughing. There's no hard cutoff, no exact moment when day becomes night. But trust me, you don't want to push it. This rule isn't enforced by the HO itself, but it is enforced. Other than that, enjoy the freedoms of Braver Row. Paint your front door any color you like, grow your hedges as tall as you want, and stroll the streets at midnight. Just remember, no laughing after dark. Sincerely, Irene, HO Chief, I snorted in disbelief. I told you living among rich people would be weird, but this is on another level. Rowan raised an eyebrow. No laughing after dark? Are they serious? I don't know what kind of dystopian nightmare we've signed up for, I replied, shaking my head. Every place has its quirks, but this is something else. God, I hate moving. It's always something, isn't it? Rowan said, her tone souring. First, it was the dishwasher that didn't work in the old place. Then it was the broken oven in the house before that. But this is just bizarre. Of course, we'll adapt, I said, flashing her a mischievous grin. We'll become humorless zombies, no laughter, just monotony. After all, Braver Row is a place of serious principles. I gave her a playful nudge. Now, go forth, my dear wife, and make me a sandwich. She shot me a withering look. Well, at least they won't have to worry about me laughing, she deadpanned. We both tried to laugh it off, but the truth was, something about that rule got under our skin. We exchanged uneasy glances, both of us unconsciously drawn to the setting sun outside the window. It felt ridiculous to be afraid of something so simple, but there was a quiet, insistent dread gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. It would be foolish to break the rule on our first night. Just in case, we decided to play along. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I needed answers. So I called Irene, the Ho Chief. "Oh, and Neville, how wonderful to hear from you," she chirped, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "How was your first night in Braver Row?" "Fine, I suppose," I replied, though I wasn't sure. I wanted to ask about that rule in the welcome letter. Oh, the no laughing after dark rule. Was everything else clear? It was. But this rule, it seems a bit extreme, doesn't it? Why laughter, of all things? Her tone didn't change. "Oh, it's nothing to worry about. Just don't laugh after dark. That's all." "But why? What's so dangerous about laughter? Is it a noise issue or something else?" There was a brief pause, just long enough to make my heart skip a beat. "Well, Mr. Neville, let's just say the rule is there for your own safety," Irene said, her voice still cheerful, but with an undercurrent of something darker. "We've all learned to live by it, and we've all benefited from it. What happens if someone breaks the rule?" I asked, a chill creeping down my spine. Another pause, longer this time. When Irene finally spoke, her tone was cold, almost mechanical. "I'm afraid I can't explain it, Mr. Neville, but if you ever met the people who broke the rule, you wouldn't need to ask." Before I could respond, she hung up, leaving me alone in the silence of my study. I sat there for hours, paralyzed by her words. It might sound extreme, but something about that call left me rattled to my core. I had no doubt in my mind that Irene had been serious. I believed her when she said there would be consequences if we laughed after dark. I wasn't going to wait around to find out what those consequences might be. It was late, around 9 p.m., when Rowan finally came home. The sound of the front door slamming jarred me from my trance-like state. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind racing with everything Irene had said. I had no idea how to tell Rowan, but I knew we had to leave. That night. "Owen?" Rowan called, her voice breaking through the fog of my thoughts. I got up shakily, my legs weak beneath me. My body felt heavy, as if something was physically weighing me down. By the time I reached the lobby, I was sweating. The fear gnawing at me all day hadn't eased, even with Rowan's presence. When I saw she wasn't alone, my anxiety spiked even higher. Rowan's colleague, Joan, was with her, smiling as if nothing was wrong. "Sorry for the intrusion," Joan said, glancing at me. "Just borrowing a dress for tomorrow. I'll be out of your hair in a second." I followed Rowan upstairs, my heart still hammering. Once we were out of earshot, I grabbed her arm gently. "Honey, we need to talk. Something's very wrong with this place." Rowan frowned, concern flashing in her eyes. "What do you mean? What happened?" I called Irene the Ho Lady, and she admitted the laughter rule isn't even legally enforceable. But that's not the point. I struggled to find the words. She said, "Rowan," she said, "there are consequences for breaking it. Real consequences." She didn't say what, but the way she talked. Rowan's frown deepened. "Are you serious? What kind of consequences?" "I don't know, but I believe her," I whispered, my voice trembling. "We need to leave. Tonight. I don't care about selling the house right now. We'll deal with that later, but we cannot stay here." Rowan hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "Owen, you're scaring me." "I'm scared too," I admitted. "Please, just trust me on this." After a tense moment, Rowan finally nodded. "Okay, we'll pack a bag and stay at the hotel. But tomorrow, we'll figure this out." I let out a shaky breath, relief flooding through me. "Thank you. You won't regret it. I promise." Before we could move, we heard a voice from downstairs. "Hey, what's taking so long? Don't tell me you got lost on your way to the wardrobe." Joan's voice echoed up the stairs, followed by a loud, cheerful laugh. Instantly, my grip on Rowan's arm tightened involuntarily. When I regained control of my breath, my eyes shot to the bedroom window, eyeing the darkness that had swallowed the horizon. A sliver of sunlight persisted, glowing faintly at the end of a blackened tunnel. On that humid summer's evening, I prayed for the first time in my atheistic life. I prayed that Joan had laughed before the darkness consumed the world outside. "Owen," Rowan whispered, her lips trembling. "Would you call it dark outside?" I turned to face her, my stomach knotting as I searched for an answer that wouldn't terrify her further. Her head rolled slowly toward the window, then back to me. Her eyes were wide, fearful. She tried to smile, but it faltered. "Oh, it'll be fine, honey. I'm sure it'll be fine," she said, her voice shaky. Joan didn't know about the rule. They'll probably give her a slap on the wrist or something. It's not like it was in the contract, right? Her words didn't convince either of us. The haunted look in her eyes mirrored my own, something intangible. A ripple of doom hung in the air. It was like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting. I had felt it when we first unloaded the moving van, a sense that something was watching. Rowan must have felt it too. Downstairs, Joan's voice rang out cheerfully. "Hey, what's taking so long?" "I'm still waiting." Her laughter followed, piercing the air with an almost mocking lightness. "Stop laughing," I mumbled to myself, clutching clumps of my hair, desperate for silence. "Come on," Rowan whispered, hurriedly grabbing a blue dress from the wardrobe. "She'll take this and leave. Then we'll get out of here too." "We have to, Owen." I nodded, my throat tight, and took the dress from Rowan's trembling hands. Together, we walked across the landing like prisoners marching toward an inevitable execution. I peered over the banister, my eyes falling on Joan, standing in her turquoise scrubs, matching Rowan's smiling as if nothing was wrong. She was still laughing. "Well, you took your time." Joan giggled again. "Did Rowan need your fashion tips or something, Owen?" Rowan stepped out from behind me, visibly pale. Her smile was stiff, forced. "Just getting the dress." "Oh, Rowan, come on. Don't go shy on me now." "What? Did you two lovebirds sneak in a little quickie while I was waiting?" Joan chuckled again, her eyes bright and oblivious. Rowan barely managed a weak smile as she handed the dress to her friend. "Here you go. You'd better get going, Joan." But Joan didn't move. She was still laughing right until the moment her laughter turned into choking. At first, it didn't register. Rowan gasped and rushed forward, her arms catching Joan as she collapsed, her face contorted in pain. Her laugh had been replaced by desperate wheezing, her hands clawing at her throat. My heart froze, unable to comprehend what was happening. "Joan? Joan!" Rowan cried, trying to perform the Heimlich maneuver, her voice trembling with panic. "Come on, breathe. Just breathe." Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Joan's legs buckled, her face turning red as she fought for air. Then, with a sickening crunch, one of her ribs cracked under Rowan's grip, and a vile stream of bile erupted from her throat. And there, floating in the mess that pooled on the floor, was a crumpled piece of paper. My body moved before my brain had fully processed the horror unfolding in front of me. I knelt, shaking, and picked up the soggy note, scraping away the bile. Neatly printed words came into focus, their meaning slowly sinking into my mind. "Expulsion notice, please exit through the basement." I read it aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. Rowan's eyes were wide with confusion, while Joan, gasping but conscious, stared at me, still coughing weakly. "What does it mean?" Rowan asked, her voice a fragile thread of sound. "Expulsion notice? Owen, what is happening?" I looked at her, then back at the note. The words didn't make sense. None of this made sense. But the last instruction on the note was chillingly clear. "Please exit through the basement." Joan had already staggered to the front door, throwing it open in a desperate bid to escape. But instead of the outside world, the door opened onto the kitchen. She screamed in frustration and ran to the back door, only to find herself looking at the front hallway again. Rowan and I followed her, horror tightening around us like a vice. Every door, every window, opened onto different parts of the house. There was no way out. We were trapped. Rowan's voice trembled as she spoke, clutching my arm. "Owen, the note said to exit through the basement. It's the only place we haven't gone." I didn't want to believe it. The basement had always felt wrong to me. I hadn't even wanted to unpack there. But now, as we stood in this twisted, looping maze of a house, it seemed to be the only option. With a deep breath, I nodded. "Let's go." We made our way to the basement door, its wood creaking ominously as I pushed it open. The staircase leading down was bathed in darkness. No light switch in sight. I hesitated, feeling the oppressive weight of dread settle over me. Rowan squeezed my hand, her fear palpable. Joan was sobbing behind us, barely holding it together. Together, we descended into the blackness. The basement was different than I remembered. Gone were the shelves and boxes we had yet to unpack. It was an empty void, a lightless expanse that felt like it could go on forever. My hands fumbled along the wall, but there was no switch, no way to illuminate the space. "What now?" Joan whimpered, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know," I replied, my voice trembling. "We should look for an exit," Rowan suggested, though the words sounded hollow in the oppressive darkness. "This is the exit," I said, pointing to the stairs behind us. "The note said so." "No," Joan interrupted, her voice firmer now. "No, this can't be it." "Joan, calm down," Rowan pleaded, turning to her friend. "We'll figure this out." But Joan wasn't listening. She was shaking, her voice growing more distant, as if she was drifting away from us, though we hadn't moved more than a few feet. And then she started laughing again. It wasn't a kind laugh. It wasn't even her laugh. It was a hollow, soulless sound, echoing through the basement, reverberating off walls that shouldn't have been there. The sound chilled me to my core. I reached out, grabbing at the air, desperate to pull her back, but there was nothing. She was gone. I could hear her, feel her presence, but she was no longer there. "Stop it, Joan!" Rowan screamed, her voice cracking with panic. "Please, stop laughing." But it wasn't Joan anymore. Something had taken her. A sudden, sharp pain shot through my mind, like icy fingers clawing at my brain. I turned, dragging Rowan toward the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. We had to get out. We had to leave. As we reached the first step, Rowan hesitated, her voice trembling. "Owen, we can't just leave her." I turned to face her, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "There's nothing we can do. She's gone." Rowan's eyes filled with tears, but before she could say anything more, I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, something moved in the darkness. A hand, if you could even call it, that reached toward us. It was skeletal, with 6 fingers, its gray skin hanging in ragged strips. It wasn't Joan, and it wasn't the Watcher. This thing didn't belong to our world. It was something far worse. I yanked Rowan up the stairs as the fingers stretched toward me, barely missing my shoulder. We slammed the basement door behind us and ran for the front entrance. This time, when we opened it, the porch, the driveway, everything was where it should be. Without a second thought, we raced to the car, leaving behind everything we owned, and sped away from Braver Row. We haven't returned since.